We're fearlessly talking about the biggest stories that matter to you the most. Breaking news, John Calipari is finalizing a 5-year deal to become the Arkansas Razorbacks' next head coach, covering college sports like no one else. The biggest guests in sports. We now welcome in Hall of Famer Jim Calhoun.
Such a pride I had, I came to Connecticut.
The legend, Tim Tebow joins us.
We'll run it back. I like it.
The legend, Herschel Walker. Welcome in, everybody. Wednesday afternoon edition, Air Torres Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Air Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's having a great day. Again, apologize a little bit for the weird taping schedule. We have late night college basketball. We're recording the next day. We got more college basketball tomorrow. Doesn't change the fact that we got a loaded show today, and we'll have a loaded show tomorrow as well. It is Wednesday, and we have a lot to discuss. Okay, so what we're going to open with, we'll talk college football playoff rankings. Alabama appears to be in pole position. Surprise, surprise. If you see me on YouTube, you can see I'm winking. I got a little beef with what the committee did over the course of the last couple days. Don't love some of the rankings and maybe one or two teams that feels like they maybe got a little bit screwed. From there, did you see the report that our old buddy, Urban Meyer III, Urban Meyer, trying to get back that Ohio State job? Could it happen? I don't think that report is as crazy as it sounds. And then from there, we will talk a little bit of college hoops. Obviously, a busy Tuesday night in the sport. Kentucky loses the first game of the Mark Pope era. What does that mean? Oh, by the way, Arkansas and John Calipari rally. Tennessee wins. The SEC laying wood to the ACC in the SEC-ACC Challenge. By the way, Wednesday night, we have Duke-Auburn. We have Carolina and Alabama. We have UConn-Baylor. We previewed those games on Tuesday's show. So if you missed all that, make sure to get caught up. Before we get started, a couple quick things. One, make sure you're subscribed to the Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. New clips, new videos going up every day on YouTube. We go live 3 to 4 days a week. By the way, crossed 47,000 subscribers. Thank you for your support. I think we get to 50K before the new year. Cannot do it without your help, though, so make sure that you are subscribed on YouTube. Also, make sure that you're subscribed on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. We really do appreciate your support. Also, before we get started, we got to welcome back one of our favorite partners, our favorite sponsors. Yeah, I'm talking about Cauley Puffs and CauleyPuffs.com. So it's the holiday season. You just spent last week sitting on the couch looking like a big, dirty old slob. Okay, you had turkey gravy all over your chest, mashed potatoes running out of your mouth. Well, here's the deal. You're trying to lose weight, but you're still watching football. You need that healthy but delicious snack to have while you're watching football, while you're hanging out with family over the Christmas holidays. That, my friends, is where Cauley Puffs comes in. Okay, so Cauley Puffs, family-owned company, not far from where I'm from. Joey, the founder, a football fan, season ticket holder, but basically, he's just like everybody else. He's trying to find a snack that's healthy but delicious. He's trying to find a snack that his kids like. He's trying to find a snack that he likes, and that's where Cauley Puffs comes in. They are baked, not fried. Healthy ingredients, avocado oil, no grease. But here's the thing. Unlike all that crap in your grocery aisle, it is healthy as well as delicious. Healthy and delicious. That is the key to Cauley Puffs. That's what makes them so great. I know a lot of you have tried them. I appreciate everybody who has learned about Cauley Puffs through the Aaron Torres pod. But if you have not yet, now is a great time to try them out. All you got to do is go to CauleyPuffs.com. That's CauleyPuffs.com. Also, you can find Cauley Puffs on Amazon as well. Just go to Amazon.com, search there. You'll see Cauley Puffs. You can order them, throw them right in your cart. So you got whatever in your cart. I don't want to know. Baby diapers, pots and pans, whatever. Just throw some Cauley Puffs in there as well. Thank you again to Cauley Puffs. Again, for more information, CauleyPuffs.com. And you can also order them on Amazon.com as well. With that said, it's a busy Wednesday. It's December. There's a lot going on. It's actually National Signing Day. We're probably not even going to talk about that, but there is no more time to waste. It's a busy time of year. So let's get to the topic of the day. And the topic of the day, pretty much every Wednesday in November into December, this time of year, It is going to be the college football playoff rankings, which dropped on Tuesday night from the selection committee. At this point, we talked about it on Monday's show. I believe that there is essentially 11 spots that have been sealed, okay? And I'll be quick here because we already talked about it. But the 5 conference champions, that's going to be the ACC, SEC, Big 10, Big 12, Mountain West champions, they're in automatic bids. I believe that the SEC and Big 10 losers are going to be in. So that's either Oregon, Penn State, Texas, Georgia. Both of those are going to be in. So that's 7 teams right there. Notre Dame is 8, Indiana's 9, Ohio State's 10, Tennessee is 11. And so I bring it up because it feels like those 11 have solidified their spots regardless of what happens. And now the big question coming into Tuesday was what happens to that 12th spot? It feels like the only team that could potentially get that spot that's playing this weekend, if SMU loses in the ACC title game, they would certainly be in the conversation. But from there, it really comes down to 4 teams for 1 spot. And what was interesting coming into Tuesday night, none of them play this weekend. And so it felt like whoever was in pole position was going to ultimately get that spot. And then beyond that, there's nothing anyone else can really do to move ahead of them. The committee, by the way, confirmed that after the rankings were released. And so I bring it up because coming into Tuesday night, the big question was pretty straightforward. You had 4 teams for 1 spot, assuming SMU wins this weekend. They are the 3-loss teams in the SEC, Alabama, Ole Miss, and South Carolina. And you had Miami in the ACC as well. And so it's an interesting time. And what made the playoff conversation interesting on Tuesday was who is going to be the highest ranked out of all of them, because basically it's going to unofficially seal probably a college football playoff berth. Well, as you can see on the screen, the rankings are out. Alabama moves up 2 spots to number 11. Miami tumbles to number 12. Behind them are number 13 and number 14, Ole Miss and South Carolina. And so on the one hand, it's interesting. On the other hand, it feels like it has unofficially clinched Alabama a playoff spot pending an SMU loss or pending an SMU win on Saturday. And let me say this. I don't know if Alabama is the right team or the wrong team, but what I do know is I hate the way that the committee got here, and I hate the fact that one team was not rewarded for playing a very tough game on the road and winning on last Saturday. That team, the South Carolina Gamecocks, they go to Clemson, their big in-state rival, number 12 in the rankings coming into that game. South Carolina gets the win, and essentially it means absolutely nothing for their playoff resume. As a matter of fact, producer Matt, go ahead and pop up my tweet from Tuesday night after the playoff rankings got announced. My tweet, I said this. So let me get this straight. A win over top 12 Clemson on the road, which feels like a pretty big piece of a resume, especially this time of year, moved South Carolina up 1 spot. A win over a 5-6, now 5-7 Auburn team at home moved Alabama up 2 spots. The rig job is in. So I tweeted that out on Tuesday night. I got a lot of reaction. Now, let me say this. Do I truly believe that the committee has rigged the college football playoff? I do not. Do I truly believe that there's no argument for Alabama coming out of this past weekend to be the top 3-loss team in the SEC? I cannot say that I don't believe that there is no argument. As a matter of fact, I'll take it a step further. There's actually a very strong argument because Alabama has the head-to-head win over South Carolina. What I will say is I am sad, disappointed, and frustrated that South Carolina beating a top 12 team on the final weekend of the regular season essentially meant nothing for their playoff resume. And I think this is a black eye and an embarrassment for the playoff committee. And I'll be transparent. I also think This, to me, speaks to brand bias and why, even in a 12-team playoff era, the big brands in this sport, Alabama, Texas, whoever, Ohio State, and I'm not saying Ohio State or Texas got the benefit of the doubt on Tuesday, although some would say Ohio State did because they'd still be hosting a playoff game. But I always believe big brand bias is going to impact this sport. I always believe it is going to impact these rankings. And I believe we saw it all firsthand on Tuesday night. Why do I say that? Well, let's go ahead and dive in. And first of all, Tuesday, what it really reminded me of, and it's not going to be a huge surprise. It reminded me of, transparently, March Madness, NCAA tournament, and the questions that I get from all of you in the lead up to Selection Sunday in college basketball in March. I get so many questions over the course of February into March of, Torres, my team's an 11 seed according to Joe Lunardi. Can we get to a 10? Can we get to an 8? My team is a 1 seed. What do we have to do to lock up a 1 seed? And what I always say is it's impossible to know, because until the resumes are totally completed, it is hard to really know. And it is hard to have an understanding of what other teams are going to do and how things are going to break down. And so from my perspective, that's my frustration with what the committee decided to do on Tuesday night. Not that they moved up Bama. Bama was already ahead of South Carolina. But it is kind of curious that Bama is the only school that is ahead of Miami. And of course, all 3 SEC teams won on Saturday. South Carolina certainly had the most impressive win, as Alabama and Ole Miss both beat 2 of the worst teams in the SEC. Sorry, producer Matt. Auburn was kind of stinky this year. It's the truth. But the point I'm trying to make, all 3 teams won. South Carolina had the best win by far, yet Alabama is the only one that moved up past Miami. Miami falls, but ahead of Ole Miss and South Carolina. To me, that doesn't make sense. And to me, my frustration is pretty straightforward. Why did South Carolina play that game? And that was a huge part of their resume. Listen, if South Carolina had beaten Clemson in the first week of September instead of the last week of November, that would have been one of the headlining things on their resume. Same with any big team beating any other team out of conference or early in the season. Like, we don't penalize, like we give credit, as an example, for Alabama beating Georgia a million years ago. We give Georgia credit for beating Texas. We give Ohio State credit for beating Penn State. So why did South Carolina get 0 credit for beating a good Clemson team, a top 12 Clemson team on the road on Saturday? They moved up a grand total of 1 spot, and the only team that they passed was the team that they beat, Clemson. That feels like a huge part of South Carolina's resume. And if I'm a South Carolina fan, I am furious. And to me, this is where the brand bias comes in. Because you can say that South Carolina should not pass Alabama. Alabama has the head-to-head win. I'm not even going to argue with you on that. You could argue that South Carolina shouldn't pass Ole Miss. Ole Miss has a head-to-head win over South Carolina. I'm not going to argue with you on that. But let me ask you a simple question, and let's play the game of brand bias and how it impacts things like this. Let me ask you a simple question. Let's say, hypothetically, instead of playing Auburn on the final weekend of the regular season, Alabama played LSU. Actually, let's take Alabama out of this. Let's go in a different direction. Let's say this. Let's say that Michigan was ranked number 12 in the country and Ohio State was ranked number 15. If Ohio State went to Michigan and beat Michigan, now that won't happen because it'll never happen under Ryan Day, because Ryan Day is the head coach of Ohio State, but that's another conversation for another day. But if Ohio State was ranked 15th, if they go to Michigan and beat Michigan on the final day of the regular season and Michigan is ranked 12th, regardless of who's ahead of them, you think Ohio State is only moving up 1 spot? Give me a break. By the way, it's the same with Michigan if Michigan beat Ohio State. By the way, it's the same thing if Notre Dame and USC. If USC was ranked 12th and Notre Dame was ranked 15th, you think Notre Dame's only moving up 1 spot going on the road and beating a rival? So we're not giving Clemson, or we're not giving South Carolina the benefit of the doubt. We're not rewarding them for a key part of what the committee basically said was that the resume, that nothing changed on their resume. That is what the committee told us on Tuesday night. And beyond that, I'll just say this, because I think it's been a big topic with the playoff committee, with these rankings every single week. Why are we punishing teams for playing good games, especially out of conference? Wasn't this the conversation in a different manner with Indiana a few weeks ago? And I heard it from 5 different SEC fan bases. Indiana hasn't played anybody in the out of conference. They canceled a game against Louisville that they could have played. So why are we rewarding them for that? Well, South Carolina is kind of the exact opposite. They scheduled, because of history and because of whatever, a huge game late in the season that should have helped their resume. And it did absolutely nothing. And so I only bring it up because if I'm Shane Beamer, now Shane Beamer seems too nice. I saw an interview he did with Dan Dockich where like Dan Dockich was kind of poking him and trying to get him to talk smack about Alabama or Ole Miss or whatever. And Shane Beamer wouldn't take the bait. But I just bring it up because if I'm Shane Beamer, you know what I'm saying today? If I'm Shane Beamer, I'm going to the podium and saying, you know what? Clemson game's off. We're not playing Clemson anymore late in the season. We'll play Coastal Carolina. We'll play Eastern Illinois. We'll play Central Connecticut. We'll play some directional school that means nothing because playing Clemson the final week of the season meant nothing for our resume. Maybe we move it up to earlier in the season. Maybe we eliminate the game altogether. But why are we playing this game late in the year? And why are we not getting rewarded? And why, by the way, is Alabama moving up 2 spots and ahead of Miami? But of course, South Carolina only moves up 1 spot. It makes no sense. I don't care what the committee says. Listen, again, for an Alabama fan watching, I'm not saying that South Carolina should be ranked ahead of Alabama. As a matter of fact, if I was the committee, if I was a one-man committee, I would probably have the SEC teams in that order: Alabama, Ole Miss, and South Carolina, because both teams have the head-to-head win. But what I will say is you have to reward South Carolina for playing this game and adding a key piece to their resume. Again, if Michigan or if Ohio State beat Michigan on the road, they're not moving up 1 spot. If Alabama beat LSU on the road, they're not moving up 1 spot. If Georgia and Texas had been this weekend, you mean to tell me Georgia's moving up 1 spot? It ain't happening. So I'm a little bit frustrated. I'm a little bit disappointed. We'll see what happens this weekend, but it sort of feels like the playoff field is set. Ward Manuel, the head of the college football playoff committee, basically acknowledged. He's like, look, the teams that aren't playing this weekend, there's nothing they can do to improve their resume. Now, I'll be honest, I think that's kind of dumb if we're being perfectly honest, because what if, I'm just saying hypothetically, what if Georgia beats Texas by 40 this weekend? You mean to tell me that win by Alabama and Ole Miss isn't more impressive? What if, by the way, Georgia loses by 40? Doesn't that diminish a little bit Ole Miss and Alabama? And it's not just an SEC thing. What about Oregon and Penn State? Penn State upsets, or if Oregon beats Penn State by 40, kind of diminishes what we thought was a great win for Ohio State. So I could go on, but the bottom line is this. I am disappointed in the committee because it just feels like South Carolina got zero credit for getting a great win on the road that should have boosted their resume, and it feels like it did nothing. All right, that's what I want to do. Take a quick break. Come back. When we come back, we are going to talk a little bit about the Ohio State situation. It's crazy. We've covered it from every angle throughout the week. Now, we're going to come back and we're going to talk about, how about this? Urban Meyer. Reports are Urban Meyer trying to angle his way in to get the Ohio State job. We'll take a quick break. Be right back. After that, by the way, we'll talk some Tuesday night college hoops. Quick break. Be right back. All right, we're going to get back to the show in a minute. But before we do, many of you ask me all the time, Torres, what can I do to help support the show? You give me hours and hours and hours of content every single week. What can I do to help you? Well, I'll tell you what. Do me a quick favor. Check out the Aaron Torres Media merchandise store for all of your team-specific shirts, hats, and more, all available at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. A lot of you wondering, Torres, what can I get in that merch store? Well, first of all, we got our brand new Hope and Pope Kentucky basketball t-shirts. That's right. Mark Pope has arrived. He is here to save the day. Get your Hope and Pope t-shirts there. Also, Arkansas fans, the Big Pig Invasion is here. You can get your tees there. basketball school Alabama shirts, Mora Hurley 2024 UConn shirts for your tailgates at Rentschler Field, your games at the XL Center or Gamble. And oh, by the way, your Mike effing Woodson gear for Indiana. If you love football, we got you covered too. We got more Dion shirts and hats than we even know what to do with. The freeze warning has hit the plains. Auburn fans, grab your freeze warning tees now. And of course, our new era, new rules shirt applies to Nebraska football and its incredible fan base. We have more coming for the fall, plenty in stock right now. So make sure to check out the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. And you can always hit me up with any questions. Aaron Torres Podcast Questions. All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. So want to go ahead and get to another piece of news in a minute, but let me start with from the comments section. Camaro Sunrise tweets in, or he doesn't tweet in, but he comments in, it's all about the money, baby. Well, listen, all I will say is that when you have a situation where there's 3 SEC teams and only one of them moves up 2 spots ahead of Miami, and it is one of the biggest brands and one of the most successful brand in college football over the last 15 or so years, yeah, you can see where people would get a little speculative and question a little bit how and why that ended up happening. So that's my take on the college football playoff rankings. Let's go ahead and switch gears to another topic, a topic that is just as big as the rankings, just as important, and I would say just as fascinating. And that is the situation at Ohio State. Okay, so listen, Ohio State, we've talked about it soup to nuts this week. No pun intended, buck nuts, whatever. We've talked about it basically all day, every day since Saturday afternoon. We talked about the loss. We talked about Ryan Day's future. We talked about potential candidates if Ryan Day somehow leaves. And oh, by the way, yesterday we talked about the Fran Brown comments basically saying I should send Ryan Day a bottle of, quote, effing champagne for sending Kyle McCord my way. Those are Fran Brown's quotes, not mine. Hope you don't have a small child in the car, but listen, I'm just quoting a college football coach, okay? But with that said, the Ohio State news cycle seems to keep spinning. And boy, oh boy, oh boy, was there an interesting update on Monday afternoon. That is because Jay Crawford, do you remember the name? So Jay Crawford worked at ESPN forever. He was like the original moderator on First Take. Before First Take, it was called Cold Pizza. Well, he was at ESPN for a while, but he left ESPN. He's from Ohio. He's now back in Ohio. He's a news anchor in Ohio. And I haven't seen the video, but I want to read you his quotes because somehow, some way, somebody on the news desk asked him, hey, if things don't work out with Ryan Day, is there any chance old Urban Meyer could come back and take this job? Well, Jay Crawford, who lives in Ohio, was asked this exact question. Producer Matt, pop his quotes, please, because Jay Crawford said, quote, of the 3 people that I've talked to, 2 of them with some degree of certainty said yes, he would come back, and yes, they would ask him back because those are the questions that I have asked, said Jay Crawford. He continued, and he said, quote, the biggest thing to me, this is important, the biggest thing to me is this, Urban never wanted to leave Ohio State. The people that were closest to him and that know him well know that he did not want to leave Ohio State. His hand was forced because the administration at the time did not like how powerful Urban had become at the university. And so there was a real power struggle. Note that the 2 main players that forced Urban Meyer out, and that's what it was, are gone. So Jay Crawford, longtime journalist who has been in that market, basically says, you know what? Urban Meyer not only could come back, but the administration would be open to it. So goodness gracious, do we have to discuss this right now? And first off, let me start with the status of Ryan Day. We talked about it on Tuesday with the Fran Brown comments, but I will tell you the consistent message that I have heard out of Columbus the last couple days. I think nationally there's this narrative that there's a $37, $38 million buyout, that there's 0% chance that anything will happen at Ohio State. They could lose 45-0 in the college football playoff. Ryan Day is coming back because you're not paying that $45 million buyout. That is not what I've heard at all. The consistent messaging that I have gotten out of that athletic department is pretty straightforward. Everybody is on their hands and knees praying that Ohio State makes a run in the college football playoff. Because if Ryan Day is one and done, I don't think you can bring him back in this next season to Ohio State. And it sounds crazy, but let's just talk it out loud. Ohio State, like Alabama, like Georgia, like whoever, Ohio State is a program that every single year should be and generally is in the national championship conversation. They have more money, more resources, more fans than anybody in the Big Ten, and there is no reason for them not to compete at the highest levels, not just of the Big Ten, but of college football. I have a buddy who played there. He said, we don't compare ourselves to Indiana or Michigan State. We compare ourselves to Bama and Georgia. That is the standard, okay? And I bring it up because think about if Ryan Day were to lose early in the college football playoff, what we'd be talking about. We are already talking about 4 straight years. No win over Michigan. Unacceptable. We know that. 4 straight years, by the way, Ohio State has not played for a Big Ten title. Ohio State hasn't played for a Big Ten title since 2020, the COVID season. What they play? Ohio State fans, you'll remember 4 or 5 games, something like that. And they had to make a commissioner's exemption to get them in because they didn't play enough games. So we're talking about really 2019, the last time that Ohio State looked like Ohio State. And of course, Ohio State has not won a national championship since Urban Meyer did it a decade ago. And so the idea that Ryan Day is golden, I just don't buy it. And here's the bigger thing. It might not just be there's a couple variables. One, Ryan Day might try to sneak out the side door. We've talked about the possibilities of if he loses early and there's a job that's available, Ryan Day might pursue it. Ryan Day might be looking for an escape from Ohio State because he knows how hot that seat is. And beyond that, it's not just him. His family is going through it. And I'm not saying, listen, I'm not going to blame Ohio State fans, 1 or 2 people that are tweeting negative or whatever. But I know his kids are dealing with it at school. I know his wife has to deal with it at the grocery store. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that he's going to be gone. But then 2, for the people that say there's no way you're going to pay the $37 million buyout, the counter to that is what? Bring him back? And all those people that wrote all those checks to get your $20 million pool for your NIL collective? Now, listen, we could be with revenue sharing by this time next year, but you're still going to need money to compete at the highest level of this sport. And it's going to be basically impossible if you bring back the guy that had the most talented roster in all of college football and you didn't win with them last year. Now, next year it's going to be different. If I write a check for $1 million, it's going to be different next year. Why? Hasn't been different for 4 years. And so I bring it up because I think the Ryan Day part is interesting. But then there's the Urban Meyer part. And let me say this. I've sort of kind of changed my tune on Urban Meyer a little bit. If you've listened to this show for a while, you know that for years I used to say basically hey, Urban Meyer's coming back to college football at some point. There's no way that he's going to let the Jacksonville Jaguars be the final thing on his coaching, epitaph or tombstone or whatever. Now, I think that's changed. I mean, I remember 3-4 years ago when the Nebraska job opened up and he was linked to Nebraska for half a second. I was like, he's going to coach somewhere. Now, I don't know that I believe that anymore. He's 60 years old. His health is okay. I don't think he's in the best shape Nick Saban's 12 years older than him. Nick Saban looks like he's in better shape than Urban Meyer. But what I will say is that I do think that Ohio State would be the one place that I do think he could come back for. He still lives in the area. If the argument is spending time with friends and family and loved ones, you don't have to move. The grandkids are there, whatever. And like I said, I think 3-4 years ago, I thought he would take a Texas, a Florida State, if one of those type jobs happen open. I don't know that I feel that way anymore, but I do think Ohio State is the one exception. And I think what's important to note is a couple things that Jay Crawford said. One, not only do I not think that he wanted out, I think he's coveted that job since the day that he left. Jay Crawford talked about the fact of wait a second, he didn't want to leave. Well, that's true. We know that. But just think about the way that Urban Meyer has talked about Ohio State since he has left. And I know it's a disadvantageous spot. He's working in the media. He's got to be critical. But do you guys remember what he said last summer? I remember because we talked about it on this show. But he was doing some interview. I want to say it was with maybe Jim Tressel or something. And he basically said, like, do you remember what he said? He said, this is the most talented Ohio State roster that we've ever had. No excuse. Basically, he pulled the Wedding Crashers. No excuses, play like a champion. I looked up this quote before we came on air. In June, this is what Urban Meyer said about the 2024 Ohio State Buckeyes that just finished 10-2 and lost to Michigan. He said, this is one of the most talented rosters in the last decade, maybe ever. That's a big statement as they've got to play, but you look at the quality of athletes at every position, I've never seen anything like it. That was Urban Meyer in June describing the 2024 Ohio State Buckeyes. Now, you can argue maybe it means nothing. Maybe he's just talking out of his you-know-what. But to me, you know what that said? I think it said two things to me. It said pretty straightforward. It said, one, Ryan Day, go get the job done. Ryan Day, basically what everybody's saying now. You have no excuses. You got the coordinators you want. You got all the players you want. You have what we believe to be the most expensive roster in all of college football. So don't sell me that you need this or you need a new quarterback or the O-line is this or the defensive front is that or the safeties are this. No. We gave you $20 million. You got NFL talent across the board. Go get the job done. But then what it also said to me, and I remember talking about this over the summer, what it really said to me was like Urban Meyer was basically saying, this is the most talented roster we've had since 14. And you know what remember he said, it's the most roster we've had, most talented rosters we've had in the last decade. Well, what happened a decade ago? 2014, Ohio State also had a talented roster. Yeah, Ohio State won a freaking national championship. And so that to me said that was Urban Meyer basically being like, if you gave me that roster, oh, it's natty, no doubt. And so listen, I'll let Ohio State fans tell me how realistic it is. How badly do you want them? But I thought it was interesting that these quotes even came out. But I also thought it was interesting that Jay Crawford basically said, as you can see on the screen, not only that he would come back, but they would ask him back. In other words, the administration would support bringing him back, because I think that's the last important thing that absolutely has to be discussed here when we're talking about this situation. It is that, as Jay Crawford said, at the time, Urban Meyer ran college football and ran Ohio State. And so when he was forced out in 2018, now there was the Zach Smith off the field stuff. And I've gotten to know Zach. I think a lot of the stuff that was said about him at the time was nonsense, whatever. That's another conversation for another day. Zach hosts a very popular Ohio State podcast right now. Okay. But the point I'm trying to make, Urban Meyer didn't want to leave. Urban Meyer was forced out, and there was this convenient, oh, he's getting older. Oh, his health. Oh, there's this cool new trend where you promote your offensive coordinator. Remember, that was going on at Oklahoma. Lincoln Riley had been promoted a year or two before for Bob Stoops, and it was working out well. So I think Ohio State was just like, we'll keep the Urban Meyer infrastructure without Urban Meyer. And so I just bring it up because it's like, well, now that AD is gone. Gene Smith is gone. Ross Bjork is in. There's a new school president. And I think these people know, hey, we got to have a good football. We can't keep losing to Michigan. We can't keep not being Ohio freaking State. And so the one thing I can't say is how realistic it is. I think that remains to be seen. As I've said, if Ohio State wins 2 playoff games and they're playing for a natty, or they're playing, they lose to Texas on a field goal in the Final Four, that's a different conversation than if you open at home, which is where the playoff projections currently have you, and you lose to Tennessee. So I think it's interesting, but I'll tell you this. I think there's some legs to this. And I'll tell you, I think if Ryan Day's gone, I think let me even backtrack. I think Urban Meyer behind the scenes is pulling some strings and talking to some people and doing this and doing that right now. Now, could Ryan Day coach his way out of it? I'm sure he could. Could Ohio State decide, even if Ryan Day leaves or gets fired, hey, we're going another direction? Of course they could. So I'm not saying that it's like 100% done and no matter what, that's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is it 0% chance, in my opinion, that Urban Meyer could be the head coach at Ohio State next year? I don't think it's 100%, but I don't think it's 0% either. What a story. What a freaking story. All right, that's what we're going to do. Take a quick break. One more break. We'll come back and we will get to the Tuesday night college hoops. Mark Pope loses his first game as a Kentucky Wildcats head coach. What did we learn? Also, what did we learn about John Calipari and his Arkansas Razorbacks? Tennessee rolls. The SEC in general is rolling in this SEC ACC challenge. We'll take a quick break. Be right back. All right, we're going to get back to the show in a minute, but before we do, many of you ask me all the time, Torres, what can I do to help support the show? You give me hours and hours and hours of content every single week. What can I do to help you? Well, I'll tell you what, do me a quick favor. Check out the Aaron Torres Media merchandise store for all of your team-specific shirts, hats, and more, all available at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. A lot of you wondering, Torres, what can I get in that merch store? Well, first of all, we got our brand new Hope and Pope Kentucky basketball t-shirts. That's right. Mark Pope has arrived. He is here to save the day. Get your Hope and Pope t-shirts there. Also, Arkansas fans, the Big Pig Invasion is here. You can get your tees there. Basketball School Alabama shirts. Mora Hurley 2024 UConn shirts for your tailgates at Rentschler Field, your games at the XL Center or Gamble. And oh, by the way, your Mike effing Woodson gear for Indiana. If you love football, we got you covered too. We got more Dion shirts and hats than we even know what to do with. The freeze warning has hit the plains. Auburn fans, grab your freeze warning tees now. And of course, our new era, new rules shirt applies to Nebraska football and its incredible fan base. We have more coming for the fall, plenty in stock right now. So make sure to check out the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. And you can always hit me up with any questions. Aaron Torres Podcast Questions. All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. Good to be back. So give me 1/2 second. I got to tweet out something really quick, and then we will get to the rest of the show. Hold on one sec. Give me 1 sec, people. All right. All right. Whew. All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. Good to be back. So we have talked a lot of college football so far. What I do want to do, go ahead, switch gears to college hoops, because the college hoops gods are shining upon us. First of all, no rest for the weary. You know, we come off feast week last week. You think, oh, maybe it's going to be a little bit of a quieter week in college basketball, gets kind of ramp up for the college football conference championship games. No, we have the SEC ACC challenge. We have the Big East Big 12 challenge. I mentioned it a minute ago, but we did preview the big games for tonight. Auburn versus Duke, Alabama versus North Carolina, UConn versus Baylor. We did all that on Tuesday's show. So if you missed any of that, make sure to go back and check it out. But right now, I want to focus on the games on Tuesday night, and more specifically, the big result as the number 4 team in the country, the Kentucky Wildcats, undefeated, first-year head coach Mark Pope, 7-0 for the first time since the 2016-2017 season. The issue or the conversation stems, though, from the fact that on Tuesday night, they did play their first road game of the season. They go to Clemson. They're a small 1.5-point favorite. What made you think that Vegas wants you to take Kentucky, but Clemson might be the right play? Well, it turns out Clemson was. Final score 70-66. The Kentucky Wildcats take the first loss of the Mark Pope era. So let's go ahead and dive into this. And before we get into kind of the Kentucky side of things, let's just go ahead and give credit to Clemson. Listen, one, I think this is probably the first time outside of last year's Sweet 16 and Elite 8 that we've talked Clemson basketball at all on this podcast. But you got to give credit where it's due. Early on in the game, Kentucky kind of had a couple big body blows early, but Clemson weathered the storm. And let's call a spade a spade. They were a better team down the stretch, second half, made the plays that they needed to win. I think what stood out, Kentucky, experienced, veteran, tough team. Clemson matched their toughness. Kentucky, a very good rebounding team. Clemson matched them in the rebounding department. Clemson took care of the basketball, only 8 total turnovers. This was the interesting part to me from the Clemson side of things. When we previewed this show on Monday, we talked about the fact that Clemson came into this game ranked 192nd in 3-point field goal percentage defense. Well, they did a pretty good job. I think they're giving up about 33, 34% coming in. They hold Kentucky to 7 of 27 from 3. That's 26% for the Wildcats. Meanwhile, Kentucky came in as a top 10 3-point defense. Clemson shoots 8 of 25. That's only 32%. So it's not to say that Clemson had some historic shooting night, but it doesn't change the fact that, in my opinion, Clemson made more big shots. Kentucky didn't. Listen, I'll say this, is that sometimes the shots just don't fall. I tweeted this out, but in the final minute of the game, Kentucky needed a shot. Otega Owe, who was their leading scorer, missed back-to-back 3-pointers that were relatively wide open. Then Kentucky gets the ball out of bounds. Mark Pope draws up a perfect out-of-bounds play with a cross-court pass to a wide-open Otega Owe. He missed it. I'm by no means blaming the kid. I'm just saying that sometimes the shots just don't fall. Some of these are the same looks that you got in previous games, and they just didn't fall. So Clemson gets the win, but I do want to talk about the Kentucky perspective and really what we learned or are going to learn about Kentucky, because of the fact that this is kind of an important stretch on Kentucky's schedule, okay? Bottom line is that, listen, we've all been impressed by the Mark Pope thing, but this was the first of what basically becomes a very tough stretch on the schedule. 3 of their next 4, this is after Tuesday night, are against power conference teams. So they play Gonzaga in Seattle on Saturday night. Then they have a random game somewhere along the way, but 3 of their next 4 are Gonzaga in Seattle, Louisville at home, Ohio State on a neutral. Now, Louisville's banged up right now, Ohio State's whatever, but it doesn't change the fact that the schedule is going to get tougher, and I do think that we learned a couple things about this team and a couple things that I think will be applicable going forward. Good news is this isn't college football. One loss doesn't mean anything. You get right, you figure it out, whatever. First off, let me say this. This is not a criticism of the totality of the Mark Pope year. I've said it consistently. I think he has done just about everything right since he's taken the job, said the right things, done the right interviews, met with the right people, great in the portal, great in high school recruiting. I just didn't think it was his best night overall, as a head coach. Not saying he's bad, not saying he's terrible, not saying fire him, not saying I don't believe in him, but just didn't feel like, it just felt like a little bit of an inconsistent performance. First of all, I've seen him say this. Lamont Butler got 2 early fouls and basically sat the rest of the first half. And I saw Mark Pope say somewhere, one of these, it must have been at the press conference, he basically said, I should have brought back Lamont Butler sooner. So Lamont doesn't really play. And we're going to get more to Lamont in a second. Kobe Brea, who Mark Pope has called, quote, the most efficient player in college basketball, only plays 17 minutes, only takes 3 total attempts, 2 total 3-point attempts. This is a guy that came in as statistically the best 3-point shooter in college basketball. Doesn't mean that Mark Pope's terrible. Does mean that if he had to do it over again, I think you figure out a way to get Kobe Brea more opportunities, more shots, more this, more that. The other thing that I noticed, outside of just, wasn't the best night for Pope, doesn't mean he's terrible. I think we're starting to realize, and this is a lot of teams, by the way, early on in the season, you play a lot of guys, you figure out who's got it, you figure out who doesn't. I do think from the Kentucky side of things, I don't think this team is maybe as deep as I thought, because I think that was one of the selling points coming out of kind of the portal cycle and summer and this and that is, this is a team that could play 11, 12 guys. Well, you look at the game on Tuesday night, they only played 8. As I said, Kobe Brea barely played. And what I noticed was some of these guys, maybe we have to adjust expectations and adjust roles. Kirk Kriisa, I saw taking a lot of heat. Listen, I've obviously followed this kid's career since Arizona. I'm not saying he's a bad player, but you go back to the Arizona days when you played equal or more talented teams that were as physical, as aggressive, as athletic. Kirk Kriisa struggled. His last game at Arizona, go back and look at the box score. They lost to Princeton in round 1 of the NCAA tournament. He had 2 points and 3 turnovers. He did nothing, okay? And so I think he's a very serviceable backup. But when Lamont Butler gets in foul trouble and Kirk Kriisa has to play 21 minutes, it's not going to be very good. And I think we saw that result on Tuesday night. Kirk Kriisa, by the way, finishes 21 points, 0 of 4 from the field, 0 of 4 from 3, 0 total points, 2 rebounds, 0 assists. The good news is no turnovers. Brandon Garrison, former McDonald's All-American. I was a guy that kind of gave him credit during the portal season. Oh, he'll be a great backup. He'll be a great seventh man. He'll turn into a starter. He's very much a work in progress. Doesn't mean he can't be good. Just means he's probably not quite there yet. You go back to this game. You look at his game overall, 12 minutes off the bench. He's 6'11", 7 feet. You're hoping to get a good performance out of him. He finishes with 2 points, 2 rebounds, 2 turnovers, 2 personal fouls. So 2 rebounds, 0 blocks for a guy that's 7 feet tall and 2 total points. Again, not saying that he is the worst possible player that has ever, walked the face of the earth. I'm just saying that, did not get the job done and probably isn't going to be the player that I think a lot of us thought he could be. Finally, let me say this. I think to me, the biggest takeaway from the Kentucky game on Tuesday night, Lamont Butler is by far the most important player on this team. I mentioned it. He only played 19 minutes. He got 2 early fouls. And you look at the on the court versus off the court results when he played. Saw a stat that he was plus 19 in terms of, the statistics of on the court versus off the court. Kentucky was minus 21 without him. Producer Matt, also pop up the tweet that I sent you earlier in the day. I saw this is from Tyler Bentley, I think a Kentucky fan. Despite only playing 19 minutes and his team losing the game, Lamont Butler was the MVP of the game last night, according to Ken Palm. Thank you, producer Matt. And I think that just speaks to who this team is and how valuable he is. Finishes the game. And again, he only played 19 minutes. And remember, on top of only playing 19 minutes, he twisted his ankle pretty bad in the second half and was basically playing on one leg, in the second half as well. And so I just bring it up because if you're plus 19, playing on one leg, only play 19 minutes, and you still, how about this? Finished with 16 points, 2 rebounds, 5 assists, 1 steal. So you extrapolate that out. The per 40 on that is pretty good. 32 points, 10 assists, 4 rebounds, 2 steals. That's a pretty good night in a per 40. And I think what we see is how valuable he is and why you simply need him on the court more. And what it also says to me is everything that I have said from the beginning about this kid. Is I remember when he committed, he's a good defensive player and he'll come off the bench. And no. The reason that we view him as a good defensive player, he's a great defensive player. He was the Mountain West Defensive Player of the Year a season ago at San Diego State. But I think what Kentucky fans are learning is what I kind of told you. There is way more to his offensive game. The issue has been at San Diego State, he just wasn't asked to do this. San Diego State plays one of the slowest tempos. They're a defensive-minded program. That's not a criticism. They obviously have had a ton of success. Sweet 16 last year, Final Four national championship game the year before. But he's just never been asked to do what he did. And so to me, I think it shows how important he is and how valuable it is to keep him on the court. By the way, you want to know how valuable he is in Mark Pope's eyes? Remember, when he entered the portal, what happened? He entered the portal on like a Wednesday night. By Friday morning, the entire Kentucky staff was flying to Las Vegas to see him work out. Mark Pope coached against him. Mark Pope knew how valuable he was. Mark Pope told him day one, you're my starting point guard. And I think we see the value there. So bottom line is you got to figure out a way to get him on the court more. He's obviously got to stay out of foul trouble, but I think we see the value of who he is and what he brings to this team. Good news is Kentucky has plenty of chances to get right. As I mentioned, they play Gonzaga in Seattle on Saturday. That's going to be a great game. We'll probably preview that game on tomorrow's show. And then also shortly thereafter, a week after that, you got Louisville at home. You got Ohio State at Madison Square Garden. So the schedule doesn't get any easier, but the counter to that is you have a chance to pick up a couple good wins. And I'll tell you this, couple neutral court games, 1 home game. I like Kentucky to be just fine going forward. I don't think there's some like huge negative thing to say about Kentucky out of this game. Sometimes you just go on the road and you lose, and you got to get right. One team that did not lose when they went on the road, how about John Calipari's Arkansas Razorbacks? So Arkansas goes to Miami and beats Miami in this game. Final score of the Arkansas Razorbacks game, 76-73. Let's go ahead and very quickly dive into this game. So from my perspective, fascinating game that showed both the highs and lows of the John Calipari era at Arkansas, what this team can be, what it might not be just yet, but what it has the ability to be. And one thing I try to do, try not to get too high, try not to get too low, try to be fair, try to be balanced. This is not a perfect team. And even coming into this game, listen, they were coming off a disappointing performance. There's no other way to say it. You go play Illinois on Thanksgiving Day, national TV audience, following the Chicago Bears versus the Detroit Lions. You want to see a great effort. The offense was fine, but defensively, you got cooked from behind the three-point line. 15 of 31 Illinois shoots from behind the three-point line. I bring it up to say this game kind of weirdly started off the same. I think that if I'm not mistaken, Miami started off 9 of 17 from three. That's over 50%. I could be wrong on that, but they finished 9 of 29. And what I will say, I think we're starting to see what this Arkansas team can be at full strength when they have everybody. Now, I'm not saying that Miami on the road is a game to write home about. Miami stinks, and Miami is now 3-5 on the season and has lost 5 straight. But this was a game coming in. You knew you could not lose. But here's the other thing. You win this game, but more importantly, you're finally starting to get healthy, and you're finally starting to see what this roster looks like at full strength. And at full strength, it's pretty good. This is basically the first time all year that Jonas Aidoo, the transfer from Tennessee, has played meaningful minutes. He's been banged up. He's been injured. He comes into this game, plays 12 minutes, and listen, I know he didn't play a ton, but you could tell right away the impact that he has on the defensive side of the court. All those pick and rolls where, the big man comes out and he shut it down pretty early on, and then I thought played pretty well in his limited minutes. So Jonas Aidoo is playing. Now you get to put Big Z and Trevin Brazil off the bench. Big Z was awesome again in this game. He finishes 3 of 4 from beyond the three-point line, 11 total points, 2 blocks. He had a couple really big blocks late. And I'm just telling you, you're starting to see what this team can look like. Listen, I was high on this team coming into the year because I knew the individual talent. And the big question is, could you put it all together? And so I'm not going to sit here and sell that this is a program-changing win and it's going to be the best win that's ever been recorded in the history of college basketball. But think about that game on Tuesday night. I thought it was DJ Wagner's best game as an Arkansas Razorback. Maybe, I don't want to say his best game as a college basketball player, but pretty darn close. 14 points, 6 of 12 from the field, 5 assists, 2 steals. I thought he was the guy early on when Arkansas was struggling that, in my opinion, really showed a lot and really did a lot for this team and for this program. So DJ Wagner is playing very well. He played his best game. Listen, Nelly Davis, it's been up and down, but Nelly Davis, to his credit, hit a couple big shots when they needed them. 12 points, 3 of 6 shooting from 3. Remember, this was a guy that shot 41% last year from beyond the three-point arc. He's now up to 35% after he was at about 25% a few weeks ago. Boogie Fland, obviously, look, he was the guy that made all the big plays late. He hit the big 3, had a couple big shots. And I still think, his ceiling is kind of the team ceiling. If you get the best version of him, then you're going to be okay. But think about this in the counter of it as well. Think about the fact that Adou Thiero has been by far your best player over the course of the season, and he didn't really do all that much. He finished the game, Adou Thiero did, with just 7 points. He got to the free throw line a bunch, but he missed a couple shots, whatever. But I just bring it up because, listen, I know that it's Calipari. I know that we're always going to overreact to everything that happens, the good, the bad, the this, the that, and mostly the bad. When things go really bad, we're going to talk about how terrible he is and whatever, blah, 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 this and that. But the guy's still a Hall of Famer. He still knows what he's doing. And to me, this was a totally positive sign. This was a game where you did not play well early. First of all, you're on the road. And I don't care where you're playing. When you're on the road, it's not easy to win on the road. Ask Kentucky. Ask whoever. I'm trying to just think off the top of my head who was playing on the road on Tuesday night. Syracuse got smoked at Tennessee. We'll see what happens with Auburn. I think Duke's going to beat Auburn tonight. We'll see what happens. But it doesn't change the fact you go on the road. It was a must win. You get the win. And like I said, I think we saw 2 important things with this Arkansas team. One, we saw what they look like when they are close to 100%. Finally have Jonas Aidoo playing meaningful minutes. changes how you have to use Big Z. You don't have to play Big Z 36, 37 minutes a game. Trevin Brazil is back. He's kind of playing that energy, rebounding, run around, block shots, do what you got to do guy at the 4 and 5 spot. Again, DJ Wagner, in my opinion, played his best game. By the way, you saw what that backcourt looks like when all three guys are playing well. DJ Wagner, Boogie Fland, and John L. Davis. It's pretty good, right? And again, then you get Billy Richmond off the bench. You get Carter Knox off the bench. So for the last time, I'm not going to oversell it. I don't want to make this out to be the greatest win that has ever been had in the history of college basketball. But the one thing about Calipari, listen, it takes some time, maybe longer than some fans want, but generally he figures it out. You can say whatever you want about him. Last year, by the end of the season, they were playing as well as anybody in the SEC. And before I get all the comments, here's the bottom line. We talked about it all summer long. This was a team that in the final 3 weeks of the regular season destroyed Alabama at home. Alabama, of course, made the Final Four. Beat Tennessee at Tennessee. Tennessee made the Elite Eight. They were the SEC regular season champs. Beat Auburn on the road. Auburn was SEC tournament champs. And so I bring it up because if this team is healthy, if you can keep them relatively healthy, I think we started to see what this team is capable of, what their ceiling could be. Now, the big news is, of course, the SEC is really good. We all know that on whatever it was Tuesday night, they went 8-1 in the SEC Challenge. But the good thing is, one, Arkansas gets to get right on this weekend against UTSA. But the fun part is we're going to see them against a very good Michigan team next week at the Jimmy V Classic on next Tuesday. Michigan right now is sitting at 7-1, only lost to Wake Forest. They just won their Big Ten opener at Wisconsin. So we're going to start to see, is this team actually improved? Are they getting better? Was it a fluke? Whatever. But Arkansas gets the win. Really quickly, because I got to get out of here. I actually have a call coming in about 5 minutes. Tennessee destroyed Syracuse. Tennessee right now is sitting at, let's see here. They're now 8-0. They've basically destroyed everybody they've played. I tweeted this out and I really believe it. Like, Rick Barnes might be one of the more underrated coaches in any sport. Every year he loses guys. Every year they don't miss a beat. They're 8-0. All of their wins are by double figures. They actually play Miami this weekend before they have Illinois next Saturday. So we're going to find out a little bit more about them. But this is a team, listen, they're playing really good basketball. They lost a lot. They haven't missed a beat. I give him a ton of credit. Another team I just want to give a half a second of credit to is Providence. Providence went 0-3 at the Battle for Atlantis, but they come back. They beat BYU in this game. And the big thing is they got Bryce Hopkins back. Bryce Hopkins, former Kentucky transfer, was an all Big East type player a year ago. He gets hurt, misses the season, finally comes back, plays pretty darn well. All right, I'll tell you what, I got to get out of here. I got another actually interview to do here in just a moment. Before we get out of here, make sure you're subscribed to the Aaron Torres Pod and Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. YouTube, you know where to find me. Apple, Spotify on podcast. By the way, I don't know if I'm on any of those Spotify raps, but if I am, you can tweet them at me. I'd appreciate it. But I got to get out of here. Make sure you're subscribed, rate, review the show, give us a 5-star review, say some nice things on Apple, Spotify. That really does help. And I think that's it. Tell you what, we'll come back Thursday. We'll do a third straight show because we got to react to a crazy Wednesday night in college hoops. Carolina versus Alabama. Duke versus Auburn, UConn versus Baylor. We'll react to all of it. We'll talk conference championships and whatever else craziness that goes on. Appreciate everybody.